finally happy with who I see in the mirror right now. So whatever I put on, I just want to be able to see the same me looking back.
Amphibia is a special show to me. It has stories that provide exactly the kind of escapism I need after a long day, a silly world of frog-filled hijinks and disgustingly cute characters. It has stories that speak to me on an emotional level, that offer heartfelt statements on the reality of life, on the heartbreak of friendships, and the nature of change. But there are also episodes of Amphibia that frustrate me, that I feel waste my time and seem to be willfully ignorant of how shockingly brilliant it as a story has been. This kind of rift is inevitable when discussing these types of shows, where the beauty and genius of a work of animation is inevitably forced to reckon with the fact it is made for a younger demographic, even when it has story beats and character moments that are more mature and profound than the majority of media made for older audiences. This conflict between lighthearted silliness and serious emotional growth is present throughout Amphibia, and is exemplified by its central protagonist, Anne Boonchuy. Anne is a fascinating character, racked with guilt about stealing the music box and struggling to find herself in a terrifying new landscape. Over the course of the series, she changes dramatically as a person, learning about responsibility and identity, and eventually becomes the beating heart of the cast, rallying even former enemies to her side in the face of evil. But not before spending most of the first season being an obnoxious idiot. This is inevitable when discussing Anne. Unlike Sasha and Marcy, Anne takes up most of the screen time. This means that while the episodes with Sasha and Marcy are often vitally important for character moments or major plot events, almost all of the filler episodes are centered on Anne. While occasionally these episodes are very good at establishing character relationships between Anne and the Planters, and the show goes to much greater lengths to recall these events, there is still effectively a lot of dead air where we witness Anne goof off and get into trouble. It's one of the most common barriers to entry for new viewers who, including myself before I push through, believe that Anne's immature antics are the only thing happening in Amphibia. In some way, this is actually very thematically fitting, as the actual Anne is hidden behind her initial facade of a careless goofball. It's a brilliant piece of metatextual art, if you stretch your brain enough. So, why does this matter? It matters because Anne is Amphibia. This is her story, and there's something compelling about how, after she falls flat on her face over and over, she is forced to not only confront the consequences of her own actions, but also those of her closest friends, and her response to each of these events reveals her to be an incredibly heroic and noble person. Anne showed a tremendous empathy for the people of Amphibia that the other girls simply didn't. While Sasha rode high on the power-tripping toads and Marcy stayed within the isolated walls of Utopia, Anne was there in the small, inconsequential town of Wortwood. She met the little people of the world, the humble and downtrodden frogs, and became their greatest defender. Anne's story is about finding purpose in life through the connections we make to other people. It speaks to the beauty of friendship, the inevitability of change, and the lasting strength of compassion. Anne is a symbol for Amphibia, for its characters, its message, and its strengths and weaknesses. Join me, friends, as we discuss why we love Anne. As always, spoilers for the entire show. It's difficult to say what kind of person Anne was before the jump to Amphibia, because she really didn't know who she was. Obviously, as a carefree teenager, she was still figuring out her own personality, but even beyond that, Anne didn't really have a desire or ambition. From what we see in flashbacks and from her parents, Anne detested responsibility of any kind, and tried as hard as she could to shirk doing anything strenuous for schoolwork or chores.
Back home, whenever Mom asked me to do chores, I just do a really bad job so she wouldn't ask me anymore.
This isn't unusual for a teenager, but this desire to dodge anything difficult went deeper. Unlike Sasha and Marcy, who had very specific ideas about what they liked and wanted to do, Anne was more than happy to go along with her friends' plans. If Marcy or Sasha had a scheme, Anne would follow along and comply. And this had a subtle but insidious effect on Anne's relationships in life. Because Anne wanted to stay a carefree goofball, it meant that she had trouble dealing with confrontation, which led to her depending on Sasha to stand up for her. Anne relied on Sasha to protect her from bullies, but also had no language or will to resist if Sasha forced Anne to go along with her. And this meant that if Sasha got the group into trouble, she'd make Anne take the fall for their actions. Anne had barely any sense of what she liked or wanted, making it easier for her to remain passive in life, allowing others to dictate what she did. We can see this in the sleepover book, the dance party, and the most important moment when Anne got pushed into something she didn't want to do, shoplifting the music box. This moment is so fitting as the apex of Anne's complete lack of agency and a spine that she was pressured by her friends to get a useless trinket as her own birthday gift. Anne had voided her decision-making to other people on a day that was supposed to be all about herself. But this all changed when Anne opened the box. After a brief scuffle with the confused denizens of Wortwood, Anne was taken in by the loving planter family, consisting of the wise but cranky Hop Pop, the maniacal Polly, and the curious Sprig. Anne's quick thinking and compassion saved Sprig from the mantis beast, and from that moment on, Sprig knew that he could trust her. After meeting the planters and seeing that Anne is safe but still very lost, the viewer's mind fills with questions about what Anne will do next and how she'll try to find Sasha and Marcy, all of which are answered at the end of the season. Okay, listen, I rag on Season 1 because it masks the show's potential of great character moments, and hidden over these episodes we do subtly learn about Anne trying to grow as a person. But what we start with is Anne dodging the truth or failing to communicate. There's a lot of predictable, dumb, obvious conflicts here, but there are also some revealing scenes that show when Anne recognizes that her actions have consequences. Anne often had disastrous plans that fell on their face, but they almost always came from either trying to replicate something from home that she missed, or trying to stand up for someone in Wortwood. I find Toad Tax to be a particularly good episode for this reason. Anne was tempted by the authority of Toad Tower, but after seeing how they treated the frogs, she rejected their power trip. It was a really nice moment where not only did Anne come to realize that she didn't want to be a bully, but she also stood up for a group of people who had accepted their fate at the bottom of the hierarchy. She inspired the frogs to stand up for themselves, even a little, against the status quo. Despite how Anne normally detested change, she instigated it by taking the initiative. In Amphibia, Anne could be something more than a goofball pushover. In fact, a lot of Season 1 is Anne realizing that in this new place, her old reputation and social dependencies are gone. And while she spends a lot of this time making mistakes and being selfish, she does learn and grow. Anne became a genuine friend and beloved member of Wortwood, but she had to unlearn a lot of bad traits. I don't blame anyone for dropping in Season 1, but the Anne we see at the beginning is not the same as the one we see later. However, there is an underlying truth behind a lot of the worst actions Anne takes in this season, and it comes from where she learned it: Sasha. While Sasha is only in 2 episodes of Season 1, it's clear that she had greatly affected Anne, warping her idea of what good friends do for each other.
If a friend likes a pencil case, you get it for them. If your friend likes your new shoes, you give them to her. And if a friend wants you to steal a crazy music box from a thrift store, even if you really don't want to, you do it, okay? Because if you don't, they might not want to be your friend anymore.
We see the lingering trauma that Sasha left on Anne in the way that she acts when she is uncomfortable. Whenever Anne pressured the planters to do something, it's clear that this is behavior she learned from Sasha. In episodes like Girl Time and Frog of the Year, Anne's stubborn insistence is evidence of her exhibiting the same toxic traits that Sasha used to keep her down and submissive. But Anne spent a lot of time realizing the negative consequences of those behaviors, and firmly decided that she was better than that. But that made it even more of a heartbreak when Anne reunited with Sasha, and the divide between them was more clear than ever. While Anne had matured and become a hero to the people of Wortwood, Sasha had hardened into a ruthless bully, having embraced her worst qualities in exchange for Grimes' help. While Sasha only viewed the people of Amphibia as a means to an end, Anne recognized them as people worth protecting. And for a brief moment, Anne folded, returning to the same pushover that she used to be, unable to stand up for herself in the face of her old friend. But then Sprig, Anne's first real friend in Amphibia, stood up for her. This one single act was enough for Anne to remember all that she had been through with the planters, how much she cared for them and them for her, and it gave her the strength to fight back against her former tormentor. And the consequences were catastrophic for the relationship, as Sasha left with the haunting words,
Hey, Anne, maybe you're better off without me.
While Sasha survived the encounter, Anne was devastated, but comforted by the support of the planters and the gratitude of the townsfolk she saved. The events of Toad Tower were monumental for Anne because it marked her first major step in becoming her own person. and that was to reject the person in her life who stunted her emotional growth. I really like how we see Anne grapple with this decision over the following episodes, because it shows her conflict with wanting to retain her old friendships while standing her ground and realizing how she had been mistreated. But this was only the beginning of Anne's journey. In a lot of ways, finding Marcy was a huge relief for Anne, because she had finally found someone from her past who was excited about the way she had changed and who also loved Amphibia as much as she did. While Anne had embraced the frogs of Wartwood, Marcy had been socializing with the newts of Newtopia. The two shared overwhelming glee to see each other, rather than a veiled resentment between Anne and Sasha. I think this was a really good moment for Anne, because her changed self got to be validated by one of her old friends. Sasha saw Anne's growth as a threat, but Marcy was very happy for her. At least, that's how it appeared. Season 2 starts with the joy of reuniting with Marcy, but slowly reveals lingering cracks in their new dynamic. Initially, it looks like this is going to be about Anne understanding how Marcy has changed as well. Now that Marcy had been living in a fantasy world she had always dreamed of, she actively paid attention to her surroundings and engaged with the people around her more. Anne had to get used to how Marcy had grown in their time apart, or otherwise become bitter and resentful like Sasha. On that note, the two girls recognizing the harmful ways that Sasha had treated them was an important bonding moment for them to contextualize their newfound confidence. It brought them closer together, knowing that they could stand up for themselves now. The scavenger hunt episode in particular is really good for showcasing Anne's insecurity about her own intelligence, but while also showcasing her amazing social skills.
You get along with people so well! 3 people you met today just risked their lives to save you. Heck, the planners here adopted you and would do anything for you. Yeah, sure, I'm good at solving puzzles and calculating the check, but you're amazing at making connections.
As the season progresses, however, we see little oddities in the gap between Anne and Marcy. Marcy was happy to see that Anne had bonded with the planters, but when it was time to retrieve the music box, Marcy made Anne choose between staying with her and going back to Wartwood. And Anne's decision here had monumental consequences. Anne initially thought it best to stay with Marcy, but as her heart felt it, she wanted to stick by her new family. They had done everything for her, and it felt awful to leave them behind. Anne had changed because of the planters, and in this moment she chose to go with the people who had helped her become a better person. While Marcy reminded Anne of who she was, the planters were a symbol of how far Anne had come. This tension between Anne and her old friends would become even more apparent when Sasha rejoined the gang. Anne obviously had serious gripes with Sasha, but she wanted to believe that she had seen the error of her ways. Marcy certainly contributed to this desire as well, wanting the dynamics to stay the same in this fantasy world. Even as Marcy and Anne came to grips with how Sasha had been awful towards them, they shared that desire to grow together. No better episode shows how Anne asserted herself and what she wanted than the Battle of the Bands. Apart from just being a great piece of storytelling for Sasha's conflicted goals and featuring a wonderful gag from Grime, Battle of the Bands is this perfect encapsulation of Anne's transformation. While her song's name and chorus seem like her old self, no big deal. It's actually this really thoughtful look on how the craziness of Amphibia has made her more in touch with who she really is, with the final lyric,
"Finally me and it's no big deal,"
cementing this. And in the narrative of the episode, Anne proved herself. She brought up her new song to the band, and even when Sasha tried to change it, Anne stuck up for herself. Even in the presence of her old friends, doing an activity that used to be defined by Sasha, literally the band was called Sasha and the Sharps, Anne had the confidence and faith in herself. It's a small detail, but it shows how the growth that Anne had gone through meant big changes, even ones that would distance her from her old friends. Let's talk about empathy and forgiveness. Anne dealt with these two factors a lot, more than any other character. While the other two girls had a lot of growth in their own respects, Anne was the one who confronted the conflicts of forgiving people who broke her trust, and this happened with both Hop Pop and Sasha. The difference between her approaches is telling for how she determined her own boundaries. Let's first take a look at the first instance where it's revealed that Hop Pop hid the music box after he realized the dangers it possessed, completely lying to Anne. Obviously, Anne was incredibly hurt by this, because it betrayed the trust that she had established as a member of the planter family, who she had just left her human friend to stay with. Anne had put her faith in Hop Pop, and his desire to protect the real family left Anne feeling worthless and hurt. The fallout from Hop Pop's apology is fascinating, because Anne recognized that even though she wanted things to go back the way they were, she knew that she needed time to forgive Hop Pop. This was a huge emotional revelation, where he had acknowledged his mistake and apologized, but still needed to build the trust back up.
I'm sorry, Anne. You take all the time you need. Maybe it's enough to admit we've still got issues, instead of pretending they don't exist.
I think that'd be good.
Now, in the case of Sasha, Anne had much more on the line, as Sasha had tried to manipulate her several times over. Sasha had been given her chance, and when she betrayed Anne and Marcy in true colors, Anne refused to give her the benefit of the doubt, with Sasha having completely burnt out any trust Anne had left. An important distinction is that Anne saw the difference between Hop Pop and Sasha's pleas. Hop Pop had made a mistake out of insecurity and shame, and had put the work in to reforge the foundation of trust with Anne. On the other hand, Sasha had repeatedly lied for her own selfish gains, and Anne had already given Sasha the time to make amends. But Sasha had completely disregarded that forgiveness and squandered it, making it impossible for Anne to trust her at the top of the gate. Even though Sasha was correct with warnings about Andreas, Anne was in the right to disregard Sasha's words.
Anne, please! Too late, Sasha!
Also, side note, just want to casually drop that even though Sasha is considered the fighter of the group, Anne has beaten her in fights twice with worse weapons, less training, and one shoe. I find what's pretty interesting is that unlike Marcy and Sasha, whose whole worldviews got completely upended in true colors, Anne's basically stayed the same. She stood up for her friends during Sasha's coup, and when Andreas' secret was revealed, Anne rallied the others to attack the new threat. And when it seemed that tragedy struck, Anne channeled her love for her friends and anger at Andreas into her new calamity power. What I find especially poignant about this moment is the reason she had her latent power is because of her concern for her friends. In the Second Temple, Anne had proven her worthiness and faced her mistakes and accepted them. And right before the temple was done recharging the stone, Anne thought her friends were in danger. That split second of compassion would end up saving the lives of not just her friends, but countless others of Amphibia, as it let Sasha and Grime escape and gave Marcy just enough time to send Anne back to Earth. For Anne, True Colors was the moment where her love for the people around her gave her strength in what looked to be the darkest hour. Anne now had real, tangible power to back up her kindness for those around her, and with a cataclysmic threat revealed, Anne was ready to defend her new home. Surely, the first thing she did after getting back to Earth was try to head back and rally the humans to learn more about Amphibia, right? So, let's talk about the first half of Season 3. This section of the show gets maligned a lot for grinding the pace of the larger story to a halt, and while many of the episodes feel like an attempt to return to the episodic structure of the early seasons, they do show how Anne has changed once she is put back in the real world. More than anything, these episodes have some great moments where Anne had to confront the harsh reality of being separated from her parents in real life for 6 months. So while I understand the frustration with the abrupt change in scenery and tone, allow me to state why these episodes matter. This block had Anne demonstrate her change in attitude to her parents, and deal with the fact that she had no idea how to get back to Amphibia. As she became the protector of the planters in a world they had much to learn about, she embraced maturity by giving back to the community that helped her parents. But ultimately, all this leads to the journey back. I really like how while Anne still retained her goofball personality, she really did try to learn about how to transport herself back to Amphibia and try to offer a small comfort to Marcy's and Sasha's parents. Anne did still have fun and get distracted, but when the chips were down and things got desperate, she got serious and used her powers to send herself back to Amphibia. I think there's no better sign of Anne's effect on those around her than the amphibian resistance. Anne had inspired Sasha to change herself and become a better person, and now she commanded the new front to stop Andreas' conquest. Anne had rallied the people of Wartwood to defend themselves from oppressors, and now they stood at the forefront of gathering supplies and people to fight back for their home. Anne's kindness had reflected upon the world, and when she came back, it was ready for her fight. The rest of the season continues this pattern as Anne united the rest of the bickering peoples of Amphibia to recognize the threat of Andreas. Recruiting Beatrice's Toad Army, the Olms, and Tritonio are these great moments because they are contextualized by the more fluff episodes in which these characters are introduced. So seeing them return to unite with the Resistance is both satisfying from the perspective of Anne, helping people from all walks of life on Amphibia, but also makes those previous episodes matter much more in retrospect. Like Anne, what was once a goofy distraction now played a serious role in the story. Each citizen of Wartwood and every minor character showed up, united by not just Anne, but by the people following in her lead. That was, understandably, a huge burden to bear, but Anne confided in the now redeemed Sasha to help her in maintaining control of the now massive army of amphibian fighters. Sasha felt immense regret for everything she had done in the past, and it was really nice to see the two of them rebuild their friendship, even in the chaos of the rebellion. The people of Wartwood only trusted in Sasha because of Anne's reputation, and Anne got to see firsthand how Sasha had put in the effort to change and grow herself, following in her own example. I want to put a special focus on this one segment of The Beginning of the End, where Sasha showed conflicted emotions over trying to forgive Marcy for sending them into Amphibia and lying about it.
Okay, so let's say you're right and we've been taking Marcy for granted. That doesn't change what she's done.
It's not about what she did, Sash. It's about why she did it.
So I'm just supposed to forgive her? Like it's easy?
It's not easy. Forgiveness is hard, and it can take time.
Anne had the same emotional conflict, as she also had mixed feelings about Marcy's actions. But it spoke to Anne's empathy that she sought to understand why Marcy lied to them. And because she had worked through her own emotions forgiving Hop Pop and then Sasha, she could then help Sasha understand how to forgive and give people the space to change. And it was that faith that Anne had put in Sasha for her to change and grow that would ultimately seal the fate of the invasion, as Sasha, inspired by Anne, would defeat Darcy and give Anne the opportunity to deliver the final blow to Andrew's mech. All that was left now were the final remnants of Amphibia's greatest evil. The final encounter with the core truly tested Anne's courage. The core represented everything insidious and parasitic in Amphibia's past. It saw the Calamity Stones as the world's greatest treasure, the most powerful tool for annihilation and conquest, and saw change as the complete destruction of its own hateful philosophy. Anne was standing for the real treasure, the people of the world. The people of Amphibia had shown Anne kindness and comfort, had given her hope, and she wanted to do everything and anything to protect them. Despite the combined power of Sasha and Marcy's Calamity forms, the overwhelming might of the, I guess you call it a moon thing? I don't know. Proved too much. Anne had a very serious choice to make. One that would cost her everything. Now, if you've seen my Adora video, you know that I'm always a bit skeptical of the heroic self-sacrifice trope. If done poorly, it becomes a cheap heartstring pull, or a way for a character with no sense of their own life to justify their own nihilism. But this was not the case with Anne. This moment was Anne's definitive choice. She had been plagued by indecision and utter avoidance of all confrontation and change. But in her time in Amphibia, Anne had grown to love herself, and with that, had poured herself into becoming a defender for the people who had helped her along the way. Anne's sacrifice was her decision, the act of agency and selflessness to denounce the bully that tried to strangle the heart of Amphibia. Anne made her choice for the good of everyone, and faced the end for the sake of those around her. And her bravery did not go unnoticed. The encounter with the Cosmic Guardian was proof that Anne had shown selflessness with some of the most powerful magic in the universe, and for that, the Guardian would reward her greatly. But Anne refused, and why she did was telling. Anne declined the offer, not only because she wanted to go back to her normal life, but also because she was no longer afraid of the coming change. She wanted to face reality, whatever it may bring, fully aware of the possible heartbreak, lost friendships, and chaotic upheavals. I think it's a pretty profound message, and one that is a constant part of life. Change is unavoidable, and each of the three main characters had to confront their fear of it. But Anne was the one to remind them, and herself, that even though it can be scary and unpredictable, change will happen, and learning to grow and face it is what it means to be human.
But nothing Not distance or time can break the bond that we share, because nothing can take away the memories of the time we spent together.
Andrews and the core had festered a hatred for change for so long that it had eroded their very beings into hollow husks. Anne rejected that fear by acknowledging and accepting that she still had a lot to learn. That humility earned her a chance at life again, and it was because of her relationships and bonds with her Earth friends, the people of Amphibia, and in particular, one humble frog. It's so funny to say that this little pink goober is the emotional heart of the story. Sprig was the first frog person Anne met, but he was also the first amphibian who vouched for her. He was her best friend, who not only made her feel better in a vastly unfamiliar and terrifying world, but he also helped Anne grow, realize her own faults, and made her a better person. Sprig was the living proof that Anne could make friends who wanted her say, who trusted her, who enjoyed her company, and saw her as an equal. They also personally saved each other's lives, such as when Sprig gave Anne the strength to fight back against Sasha's manipulations, or when Anne's burst of power gave Marcy enough time to catch Sprig falling from the castle. No matter what the world brought, no matter the obstacle, they were a team. I also want to highlight that this friendship is an excellent and rare example of a loving but non-romantic male-female bond. And on the surface, yeah, it's obvious, right? He is a tiny frog boy and she's a human girl. But let's take a step back. The show could have easily written an arc where some shenanigans happen that make these two attracted to each other, but it didn't. Instead, it keeps their relationship non-romantic, and I think that's really cool. You don't see that type of bond portrayed that often, even in really good cartoons, and especially with main characters. Sprig and Anne loved each other, which made it all the more heartbreaking when she had to leave. Sprig was devastated. He couldn't bear the thought of saying goodbye to his best friend. They had changed each other's lives so much, so it felt like his world was ending. Anne felt the same way, but gave Sprig the comfort that no matter what world she was in, she would never forget him. The memories of their friendship would always be with her, and those same memories would stay with him forever. It's part of what can make friendship so special, that even when they are no longer there, the people who care about you are still with you. The finale of Amphibia is a real gut-wrenching, bittersweet moment. There's this sense of melancholic beauty because of what it means for Anne and the others to leave. It should feel like a happy ending, with the bad guy defeated and the friends reunited, but life must go on, and the cost of saving this world was leaving it forever. Amphibia was the most important place for Anne, because it was where she got to truly decide what kind of person she wanted to be, where she learned to be comfortable with who she was. It was thanks to her friends and her family that she grew into the person who would face whatever the world threw at her, and would carry the memory of the people she loved forever. The ending is a perfect encapsulation of both Anne's character and Amphibia as a show. Amphibia is goofy and silly, but that is part of its charm and wonder. It can be dramatic and serious when it needs to be, but that drama relies on the foundation of the more lighthearted episodes. Without the stories about ghosts or restaurant hijinks in this world, all the tension in the later episodes would have been toothless. In the same way, Anne was a big goofball who got into trouble and could come off as aloof and annoying. She was reckless and irresponsible, avoiding her mistakes at all cost. And yet, when the chips were down, Anne was the paragon of hope and compassion. She became someone with an unbreakable conviction to care for and defend people from all walks of life. That bravery to face the unknown and the empathy to inspire that hope in others is why we love Anne. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I love discussing the Core 3, and Amphibia has really solidified itself to me as one of my favorite animated shows. I still get really emotional watching the finale. With Amphibia, She-Ra, and Owl House all done, I'd love to know if there's another animated show you all think I should take a look at. I'd love to know what else has similar vibes. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, and subscribe if you'd like to see more like this in the future. Take care, and have a good rest of your day.